Hello, welcome to the Leap2College Interview series. Our series aims to bring perspectives from college students and recent college graduates to high schoolers. Today is our first interview, and our special guest today is Sidney Li. Welcome, Sidney. It's a great pleasure to have you here today. To set the stage, can you begin by introducing yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Otsa, for bringing me on here. My name is Sidney Li. I am currently a consultant with McKinsey Company, and I graduated from high school in 2015 from Lynbrook High School in San Jose, California, and then afterwards studied philosophy at Harvard, where I graduated in 2019. And immediately after that, I began working, and I'm currently based out of Boston.
Thanks for introducing yourself, Sidney. So just going back to your high school experience, can you tell us what motivated you to choose social sciences as your college major?
Sure. I think unlike many of the kids back when I was in high school, I was really interested in the impact that both technology as well as decisions being made in Washington, D.C. and other kind of areas of power, how they had an impact on our daily lives, on how we think about and understand not only the politics going on in front of us, but also why people do things, right? How people think. That was what really drove me to be interested in the social sciences in high school. And I thought it was a really unique environment to pursue the social sciences, given that it was in the Silicon Valley and given that I was surrounded by so many peers and leaders in technology. It really gave me a really unique perspective on what social sciences could look like in this really new technological world. So when I got to college, I really wanted to pursue that further. And because Harvard has such a strong social sciences and humanities program, I decided to take on a major in social studies, which is kind of a mix of both philosophy and the social sciences. And really study how our thinking about not only technology, but also human behavior has changed over time.
All right. Yeah, thank you for sharing. So I was just wondering, what was your perception of Harvard in high school, and how did that compare with your actual experience at Harvard?
That's a really good question. I think people tend to think of Harvard, just given where it is and how long it's been around, as this really kind of competitive and mystical place, when in actuality it really is just another university, right? With an excellent education, I think particularly with excellent peers. When I was in high school, I definitely wasn't trying to target Harvard. Actually, I thought a lot about going to the competitor school, Yale. So Harvard wasn't necessarily something that was like directly in my headlights. But I really did value having not just a high quality college education, but also one that would take me across many different fields. So having a school that had kind of a standout, kind of had a reputation in among not only the social sciences, humanities, but also in mathematics and technology and the sciences was really important to me. When I got to Harvard, I think one of the first things I realized is that it's really not as competitive as people make it out to be. Much of the competition in Harvard is really like with yourself. Like a lot of competitive people get into Harvard because they want to make themselves better, right? They want to improve along their interests and hobbies and really excel in everything they do. And that's really clear at Harvard. And I don't think there's anyone at Harvard who's like the best student, right? Or like the most accomplished. Everyone has their spikes. Everyone has their kind of talents. And that shows. And that's how you really learn at Harvard. I think that's most of the education, learning from your peers. And when it actually comes to kind of the student environment, Harvard is really well-rounded on an overall basis. So the individual students have their own spikes, but as a school, it's really well-rounded, which I think is the perfect combination.
All right, yeah, that's a very interesting story about how you weren't even thinking about Harvard and just were set on Yale, but actually ended up going to Harvard. So in continuation, if you look back on your 4 years in high school, is there anything you would change about the activities you did in preparation for a college like Harvard and Yale? And any of those activities impact your decision to go to Harvard?
Sure. I think one really important thing to preface this with is that people have so many different experiences growing up in high school. I grew up in Silicon Valley, and so did you. And I think even though we're like almost a generation apart now, right? I think we kind of share a very certain type of experience where our parents had a lot of resources for us to excel, and that was really kind of provided to us as kind of something that we shouldn't kind of be ashamed by, that we should really make use of, and that really determine what we would be doing in high school. And what I mean by that is, for example, starting in elementary school, I would have Chinese school every day, and then piano class on Wednesdays, and swimming class on Tuesdays and Thursdays, right? Just like a bunch of extracurricular activities that really made for a diverse experience in high school. But I think my experience also lacked a lot of diversity because I was really in a bubble. 80% of Lynbrook High School, and even more now, are Asian Americans from a very similar immigrant background, which is different from the rest of the United States, but also very constraining when that's just been what it's been like for your whole life. So I think one thing I would have wanted to do more in high school was to take advantage of experiences to go into different communities, both in the United States, I guess primarily in the United States, to see, to understand how other people live and perceive the world, right? Whether that's doing a semester in a different state or city, or doing more volunteering, or maybe interning, kind of in a more public-facing role, either in politics or in community service, maybe outside of the 30 miles of my community. And I think that wider perspective would have helped me a lot in terms of taking full advantage of my experiences in college.
All right, yeah. That's really interesting about how you like talked about the bubble that you were in, about how the majority of the school that you went to, Lynbrook, was just mostly Asian American, and how you thrived in that community. So now I just want to talk a little bit about your college experience. So I've heard that Harvard is a very competitive school and kids are very stressed. So have you come across any students with mental health issues like stress, and how do you quote unquote survive in this environment?
That's a very pertinent question. I think mental health is becoming more and more visible, not just on college campuses, but also high school campuses. And Harvard is no exception. Harvard does a lot, I think, to try to address mental health, but I think a lot of people still say it's not enough, given that the number of people who report having kind of mental health problems are rising. And I think for me, I wonder a lot about how much of that is coming from the school itself, and how much of that is just coming from the way the world is around us. And I think 2020 is a perfect example of why that latter might be the case. So I think for me, it's not really. I think part of it is exercise and survival, right? But part of it is also acknowledging that you can't do everything by yourself. That your own willpower isn't going to get you from 1 to 100. It never has been just your own willpower going from 1 to 100. And going back to the whole thing about growing up in the Silicon Valley, the only reason I was able to pursue so many interests in policy debate and philosophy and literature was because my parents had the resources to let me do that, to like read in my free time rather than go and work a job. So people have been supporting us and kind of financing our life, if you will, for a very long time. And when you get to college, you realize that that doesn't have to just be financial support, right? And not to say that my parents just gave me financial support, but like I think you realize how much your parents give you when you're in college that is beyond just giving you time and giving you opportunities. They also give you a lot of moral support. And one of the biggest challenges when you get to college is learning to replace your parents' moral support, or at least add on to your very far away parents' moral support with support from your community. So I think learning to reach out and lean back on and lean on and depend on your community is a very healthy thing that will not only help you survive, but also will help you benefit the other people that you're around and that are also learning from you.
All right, yeah, thanks for sharing about that. So today, high schoolers are also very stressed, just like college students, as they may be taking several challenging AP courses, or as you mentioned, other extracurriculars like swimming or any other activities like that. So do you have any kind of methods or advice for coping with stress like this, like in comparison with the ways that you coped with stress in college versus high school?
Yeah. I think for a lot of people who want to excel at a place like Harvard, right, you always have to have and not just Harvard, at a place of like similar stature, like Berkeley, right? I think we should leave those out as just really good schools where there are a lot of extraordinary people who go on to do extraordinary things for society. There's always a balance you have to strike between pushing yourself and giving yourself enough space to take apprehension of the development that you've gone through, right? Take apprehension of the experiences you've faced, and kind of just sit back and not like to be productive, right? But in like the typical sense, but be productive in the sense that you're reflecting and meditating on and understanding how you're feeling and how you made decisions you made. And I think that balance is really crucial, whether it's in college or in high school. In high school, I think we're pushed a lot more because it's mostly our parents and our teachers and even our peers who kind of create the impression that we have to take this AP class or we have to do this extracurricular in order to succeed. When in fact, those are just paths that they're offering up to you to success and excellence. And which path you eventually take and how you take it, that is your decision. If you feel like, you know, doing swimming classes as well as speech and debate, and also taking 6 APs in 1 year is too much for you, and that taking all of that isn't going to be the best combination to maximize what you'll get out of college, out of high school in terms of personal development, in terms of broadening your experiences, in terms of just becoming more mature and thoughtful as a person, then say no, right? Say no, and don't do it. And I think there are two hard parts to that. The first one is saying no, right? Like it's hard to push back against your parents and especially your teachers and peers because there's just so much social pressure there. But I think the other hard part of that is deciding what you really want. I think too many of us fall into this trap of taking 6 APs not because we think that's the only way to be successful, but because we don't have any other ideas about what it means to be successful. And once we start having our own ideas, our own goals, I think that's when you get the courage to say no. And that's also when things you do will also feel much more fulfilling.
Okay, thanks. So just moving on with your college experience, I noticed that you conducted some research with professors in the Harvard Business School and the Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Study. So can you please tell us about the research that you conducted and some key takeaways that you had from it?
Sure. I think one of the best resources that Harvard has and any major research university is the opportunity to work directly with professors who have spent years already in academia and are opening up a new field and being able to participate in that. So to just give you a little background, the Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Study is kind of a special institution within Harvard that is dedicated to advanced research. So advanced research meaning kind of like people who are late in their academic or creative careers and who are pursuing kind of a masterpiece project in an area of study that will take dedicated time away from teaching to work on. So with the Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Study, I worked with this professor named Mary Lewis, exploring the French decolonization of Haiti. And this was a really interesting topic to me because at least when I took AP US history, I learned a lot about the history of Haiti, right? Given that it's both a country that's so close to the United States as well as a former colony of France, which still is a major kind of foreign partner of the United States. And I found it really interesting because we learned about the colonization and then Toussaint Louverture came by and that was kind of it, right? Like you never learn what happened. And then you look at Haiti now and it's kind of a very, very different type of situation. And being able to do detailed research on how exactly that decolonization process worked, not just from a political perspective, but also from an economic perspective, just taught me a lot about how Haiti, kind of this model of a successful slave uprising that created an independent colony, how that an independent nation, how that turned into kind of the economic state that Haiti is in now. And I think one of the things I learned, and I don't think I have the facts completely correct here, but I think it wasn't until the mid 20th century when Haiti paid one of its last reparations to France for deciding to become independent. That was how late it was, right? And throughout that whole time, France was trying to figure out how to compensate these really rich landowners who lost land in Haiti and who were still really well off. And I remember one of the papers I read, one of the petitions I read to the French government from one of those rich white landowners was, looked like this revolution happened and now I actually have to like work a job in order to make money. So it's just really astounding narratives about from kind of like the French side of the whole issue. So that was really eye-opening. And I think even though I didn't end up pursuing history as a major or becoming a historian, the skills involved in being able to connect the geopolitical and historical aspects of this issue with the economic implications encapsulated what a liberal arts education could provide. The research I did at Harvard Business School was much different. It was about basically how nonprofit organizations are able to kind of run efficiently, and it was kind of a way to figure out how for-profit organizations who were using the same corporate social governance could maximize their social impact while kind of continuing on their profit-based bottom line. So basically taking learnings about efficiency from the nonprofit side and moving to the for-profit side. And I joined at the project when it was at its very early stage, when we were still collecting data and trying to understand what we saw. So I wasn't there through the project's conclusion, but I think that was also, that was after I started at McKinsey. That was after I knew I had an offer from McKinsey. And that taught me a lot about how academic research could also be a factor in the business world, how it could become a set of practical insights for business leaders to follow to take their businesses into the next century.
Wow, that research that you talked about sounds really interesting and is super impressive and astounding. So do you know if there's any ways current high schoolers can get involved with research?
Sure, absolutely. I think it depends a lot on the type of research you want to do. With scientific research, I think it's much more easy to do if you have the right resources like laboratory equipment and mentorship. And I think many of the high schools in Silicon Valley now have that just within the school. And if not, there tend to be kind of like science professors who could use maybe a high school student in their lab. I don't know as much about that as I do research along the lines of kind of the social sciences. And what I want to say here first is that it's very difficult for a high school student to do research in high school that is at a collegiate, academic, even doctoral level. Because research is about creating new knowledge, right? And high school is about learning the foundations of knowledge. And that's a huge gap between like the foundations and like being able to poke holes in what we already know. So it's very hard, and I don't think you should expect that that's something you have to do in order to be successful in high school or to have a fulfilling experience. But that being said, if you're really interested in research, and not just research in general, I would say you have to be interested in like a very specific field of research, a very specific problem to solve, then you should definitely feel free to reach out to local professors in the area, or even out of state now, just given that you can do so much work virtually, and see if there's any way that you can help. And the thing here is you really have to be able to contribute something unique, right? They tend to not kind of just bring you on just so that you can be a lab rat or do like grunt work the whole time. Professors have a lot of undergraduates and doctoral students that they are working with already. So pulling on a high school student means a lot to them only if the high school student kind of has their own domain knowledge and depth of understanding within that field and problem. So make sure you can bring something to the table, and then reach out to these professors, cold call them. If you have any connection to them, leverage those connections, and just cross your fingers. I did a bit of research in high school, both myself as well as with a professor, and that was, I really had to find something unique, right? This was a professor who was studying Asian American studies. And my main contribution there was having a strong enough knowledge of statistics to be able to help him out on kind of the quantitative side of understanding these stories. And that ended up being just like a very small sliver of research. And what I appreciated from the opportunity wasn't being able to kind of be like acknowledged in his book or to see my work reflected in his work, but just to be, but just like the opportunity to like see this process unfold before my eyes before getting to college. That was the most valuable thing for me.
Wow, thank you for sharing all of your experiences related to research. It's really eye-opening, and I hope that everyone listening has some key takeaways from that. So now I just want to dive a little bit deeper into your thoughts at the end of your college experience and the end of your career. So I know that you were working as a business analyst at McKinsey Company, as you mentioned before. So can you please tell us a little bit about how your college education impacted your decision in acquiring this job?
Sure. I think when I was in college, I thought a lot about what I wanted to do after graduation, given that and I should probably take my own advice here, but I didn't have a very clear path of exactly what I wanted to do. When I first came out of high school, I thought I wanted to be a lawyer. And then I did a summer at a public interest law firm called the Western Center on Law and Poverty. And they had an office in Oakland that I worked at. That was really interesting to me. And the reason I wanted to be a lawyer in the first place was to do that kind of work to further social justice through structural change, through laws and policies. And it was really interesting, but I think the project I worked on taught me a lot about the type of impact I wanted to make and the best way to go about and make that impact. And it basically told me that law probably wasn't the best path for me to follow to do that. So, and the people there were amazing, but I think that really got me thinking about how exactly do I want to benefit the organizations trying to make that kind of impact and change on this world. And I decided that really I wanted to figure out how to make make organizations more innovative and efficient and effective in what they do. So for that, consulting seemed kind of like a natural next step to gain that experience. I was also really interested in entrepreneurship as a way to bring society into kind of the next phase of its ability to care for humanity. I thought technology had a lot of potential for that. And given that I myself wasn't an engineer, I thought being able to learn to work with engineers and lead them and understand their ideas would be really important. And that was another reason consulting seemed like a really good fit. So that is what really brought me into this career path. And I think one of the best things about consulting too is it's super flexible. People who get out of college as consultants don't necessarily stay in consulting through the end of their careers. So for a lot of people kind of still in college or high school wondering what they want to do, I think consulting is a great way to explore the diversity of work that organizations do, both business and nonprofit, and kind of follow the trail from there.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. That's awesome. So can you tell us about any challenges you faced in your work at McKinsey and how you overcame them?
Sure. I won't speak to kind of McKinsey specifically here, but I think one big difference between college and the real world is that I think both high school and college and just education in general, it's very exploratory, right? Like you're at the end of the day, you're taking classes so that you can learn something, or that you're doing research so that you can contribute knowledge. But in terms of the day to day, you're not trying to accomplish like something like every single day, right? You're not trying to make an impact every single day. You're kind of exploring new directions every day, learning about new areas, and then one day, maybe it all comes together and you develop something really novel, and you contribute something very interesting to what we know as a society. And I think full-time work at like an organization that is dedicated to one specific mission, right? That's very different. So I think for a lot of people who go from college to full-time, one of the most jarring things is that they no longer have the time to kind of just like sit in their seat and like wonder what is wonder about what the next step they should take is. What the new area to explore is. You have to learn to be very efficient in what you do and to be able to go for the things that will take you the farthest towards the answer you want to get to, or the goal you want to accomplish. So I think that personal challenge of being able to go from an exploratory mindset to a goal-oriented mindset tends to be one of the biggest difficulties for people coming out of college.
Yeah, I totally agree with you that exploring new things is definitely key to growth. And that's all I have for you today. And thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to share all of these perspectives.